good afternoon. This is always the tough part of the day when we're all trying to stay awake without coffee. I'm going to move on quickly. First of all, thank you very much to the organizers, Mr. and Mrs. Somani. I don't know if Arvind is here, but full hats off to him because he met me, I think, just 9 months ago and was pitching a conference, and I was like, really? In 9 months? And here we are. So congratulations to the team that supported him. I'm going to really talk about the work that we've been doing in an organization called Sangat. So first of all, just who we are and what we do, the context in which we work, Sangat's approach to scaling up interventions, and really using autism as an example of what we're doing. So Sangat was established in '96 as a child development clinic. At that point, we had some pretty specific things happening in this child development clinic, which I'm going to talk about a little later, which really has led us to becoming a research-focused not-for-profit. So that's who we are now. We are headquartered in Goa, but we work across multiple states of India. And our focus has really been about developing, evaluating, and implementing innovations, which I'm going to describe to you the reason why we've been doing this. So just talking to you about the context of where we work. In India, children represent over 1/3 of the population. And just to put it in the context of the previous speaker, that is actually the total population of Bangladesh. So that's the number of children we have in this country. We also know from this task force document from 2016 from the UK that 1 in 10 children will have, by the age of 5 to 16, a diagnosable mental health condition. So this is not what's happening in India. This is just an extrapolation of the kind of numbers we potentially are going to have. With that, we have a huge crisis in terms of skilled human resource. So this is a map which is really mapping out psychiatrists and nurses across the regions. And what you see here is you have the darker purples are really areas in which there is moderate numbers per population. While countries like India, I don't think this slide comes through really well, but in countries like India, we have just 1 to 4 psychiatrists and nurses for a lack of population. So this is, when you think about the ratio of people to specialists, this is really not, it's not sustainable to deliver services at this rate. If I start talking about child development specialists, if I talk about occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, we train and have even fewer. So this is really the kind of background to where we're working. But we do have human resources. So we have 1.2 billion people, so they're not going anywhere. We have frontline workers in all our health systems at every single village level. We have teachers, we have peers, we have primary healthcare doctors, we have pediatricians, but most importantly, we have parents and families. So with this understanding that we don't have skilled resources, but we have human resources, Sangat has really been thinking about this idea of task sharing. And what we mean by task sharing is, okay, there's some flickering going on, sorry. So what we mean by task sharing is how do we develop interventions that can go to scale. So this is not about center-based. So what we've been really thinking about is if we have to go to policy, if we have to go to government, what is the intervention we should be telling governments to give children with autism? Because we have such a small fraction of our budget which goes into health. We have infant mortality people fighting, we have immunization people fighting, it's all the same budget. So how are we in the disability sector going to push for evidence-based interventions on the front line? And one of the ways of doing this is really to work through non-specialist health workers, because they tend to be available, they tend to be less expensive, and it just makes good use of the specialists. So this is really the way we've been thinking. And Sangat has been doing this systematically across the life course. These are a vast number of projects and programs that we have run. But what I'm really going to talk to you about today, because this is an autism conference, is the work we've done in autism with respect to task sharing. This comes through systematic exploration that's been going on for more than 10 years now. And it really started actually 10 years ago to this day with the Aarti project, which was funded by Autism Speaks. And at this point, we really felt that one of the things we didn't know was the numbers. That how do I go to policy and say autism is important? I can't say that I'm seeing X children in the clinic and Y is seeing X children in the clinic. We actually need real numbers. And in this process, this was what we really were trying to do. And the second was, what are the core difficulties that families face? So we were part of a national collaboration which was funded by Autism Speaks, the NIH, and the National Trust of India. And we did a survey on just under 4,000 children across 5 areas of India. So this is really a representative population. So for example, in Goa, we looked at 500 children who are randomly selected from 25 villages. So this is really a survey methodology, and it's a very robust methodology to understand prevalence figures. This was just published this last year. And what we have now is we have our first real numbers which make some sense on the disability burden of this country. So we have 12% neurodevelopmental disorders, of which we have 1% autism. So we are pretty much sitting where every other country in the world sits, with 1% prevalence. So this is an important number to go to governments with, because this is almost 2 million children in the age of 2 to 9 who have autism in this country. What are family experiences? This is also something that we looked at in Aarti. And so there's the emotional shock that some of you might have received when you realized the diagnosis was given to you. We have mothers who give up their jobs to become primary caregivers. So in the office, my work wasn't up to my mark, and so I had to leave my job. I can't go to church when he screams and shouts. That is the place where you have to be quiet and calm. So this kind of self-imposed, self-exclusion that families undertake. So it's not always external stigma, but it's also something we're doing to ourselves. Mama, you spend so much time with him and not on me. The issue around siblings is something that is a growing need and something that we also as clinicians have to start thinking about. When he was 6 years old, this mother said he had this problem. At the center, they told us that there is no need of giving him tablets. He only requires to be given speech therapy. However, it was not possible to go every day, so we went for only a few days and then we gave up. And so considering the kind of service we were provided, this was really a place we thought we could work in. So this idea of this very high intensity requirement that families have of the current therapies in those days was something we thought we should tackle. So we really thought about what is the way forward. And there were 3 ideas that we really thought about. One was, there really was a lack of evidence-based services. People were giving eclectic services. There was really no solid evidence behind why people were providing what they were providing. There were a lack of specialists, and so we decided to use the task-sharing approach, which I've already talked about. And I think, particularly, this experience was in Goa. I think it's an experience from many parts of India, which is families were taking 3 to 4 buses just to get to us, and then there was another 4 buses going home. So we really felt that this intervention that we wanted to adapt, if we were really thinking about something which was going to go to scale, it needed to be close to the family. So with this in mind, we started looking at interventions that were available. And at that point, there was this very interesting intervention called PACT, which was the Preschool Autism Communication Therapy. It was the largest trial at that point, and I'll describe to you a little more about what a trial means. It was low intensity, so this was just given every 15 days, 1 session. It was parent-mediated. It was fully manualized, which is almost like a miracle in the autism world because very little is manualized. It used this very interesting technique called video feedback, which I'll talk to you again about a little later. And I think that screen is kind of having some major seizure type thing. But I don't know, it's kind of a little distracting. It's a good thing I don't have too much sensory overload at this point. No, what, sorry, क्या करना है मुझे? तो हम क्या करें? Let's just leave it. Can we switch that screen off maybe? And everybody can just look at the screen. Would that be okay? Is that possible? Oh, both are flickering. Oh, I can't see this because of my hair. Okay. So what should we do? Okay, sorry, I hope not going to save my time. They've got to stop the clock. Time out. Okay, so I'll just continue talking because it's, the slides are just kind of helping me. Okay. And I think what was really exciting about this intervention is that it was delivered in the naturalistic setting. So it allowed the intervention to be delivered in a center or at home. What's more exciting, what we didn't know at that point, was that this is the first autism trial that really showed very solid follow-up rates at 6 years. So these children were followed up 6 years later and were shown to have milder autism symptoms than their control arm. So what is parents as therapists, and why were we attracted by this? First of all, it can be delivered in the child's natural environment. It's tailored to the individual parent and child, and it has quicker generalization. So what I mean by generalization is, if I teach a parent something, they're really quick at saying, okay, I've done this in play, but I could also do this at mealtime. I could also do it when I'm giving him a bath. So it goes into a life of the child much quicker. It enables parents with knowledge and support and independent problem solving. So this whole idea of enabling parents is really important through this intervention, and it's a very efficient use of trainers' time. So with that in mind, we started off in 2012 a collaboration between Manchester, University of Manchester in the UK, Liverpool, also in the UK, Sangat, and the Institute of Psychiatry in Rawalpindi in Pakistan. And really we set to do two things. One was to adapt this intervention to our setting, and the second is to conduct what's a small pilot randomized controlled trial to assess whether this was going to be acceptable and feasible for our families. So the adaptation, this is maybe not such an important slide, but really it was about simplification of language. It was really trying to create language by which parents could understand what was going on, because keep in mind that this was not just about parents, but this was also about training non-specialists. So this was an intervention that in the UK was delivered by speech and language therapists, and we were going to non-skilled workers in a way. So really breaking down concepts which are familiar to many in the autism world to something that a simple graduate could understand. Keeping a flexibility of delivery and clear referral instructions. So also keeping in mind that a non-specialist cannot do everything. So that's also really important. They're not going to handle the child's epilepsy, for example. That's not their role. So when does a child get referred up is important too. So this is kind of the training and supervision cascade that we developed, and we really made very robust now, particularly around building and maintaining competency. So this is another very key word, is how do you know a person is competent to deliver something? And this is something actually many of us professionals don't go through ourselves, but we really feel it's very important that when a non-specialist is doing something at home, they need to be competent, and this competency needs to be objective. So it cannot be, oh, I like this person and so they must be competent. It's got to be measured and they have to be criterion. We've got a fully manualized intervention now, and I'm just going to show you, hopefully this is not going to flicker too much, but I'm going to show you a little video on what this intervention rolls out as. Is the sound on? Yeah. During each session, the PAS facilitator takes a box of toys and video recording equipment in the form of a tablet to each session. The parent is then requested to play with their child for 10 minutes, which is recorded. The video is then reviewed along with the parent. The facilitator uses clips within the play recording to guide the parent to reflect on what they did well, which helped their child, and things they could do differently in the future. These discussions are guided by strategies described in the manual. Supervision is conducted on individual sessions, especially early in treatment, and then takes on a problem-solving, group-based approach. So that's what the intervention looks like. Whoops. Okay, that's on a loop. So this is really, what are the key features? What do we do? So it's a developmental intervention. It goes through in a stepwise manner. It's modular. It's delivered by non-specialists. There's video feedback, which you saw. And it's naturalistic, which means we really ask the parent to play with the child. There's nothing else that's happening. But it's very specific to the information that's given back. And what we build around it is around social communication. This is something that is the bedrock of many developmental interventions, and it's really around shared attention. So just because I know there are lots of parents in the audience, I'm just going to give you some core ideas of the way we work. It's really, these are the techniques. It's around observing your child, identifying your child's signals, following your child's lead, and engaging in your child's activity. So what does this really look like? So what this looks like in some way is, supposing the child is playing with the car's wheels. The parent sits and observes, and the parent, parent maybe says car, and the parent rotates the wheels if possible. We don't encourage self-soothing and self-stimming behaviors, but something which could potentially become play is encouraged. The child is playing with the wheels of the car, the parent sits with the car, and the parent says car, and the parent rolls the car towards the child. So we start building on the play in a way that can be mirroring. And I think one of the speakers in the morning said where you're kind of almost giving a positive feedback to the child that, yes, what you're doing is good, let's do something together. And then really using this in some way to generalize. So doing a very similar, very relaxed kind of process in activities of daily living, for example, when the child wants water. So some key components for success is really that we try and understand the parents' views and expectations. We really try to explain what this key impairment is. So one of the things is really getting parents on board as partners in this intervention. Adapting the intervention to fit the child and the family. And so some of our families move very quickly through a session. Some of them are slowly, because you can see it's a very reflective process. We really want the parent to be talking. And sometimes families have not had that experience before. Their experience has usually been of being told. So actually flipping into, oh, my opinion is important and somebody wants to hear it, takes a little time and a few sessions. Hopefully this is going to not be also very disruptive, but I'm just going to show you what happens with Joshua. He was 9-year-old when he had this treatment. He was pre-verbal, and he uses a lot of non-verbal methods of communication. He does some amount of self-calming behaviors. But really what I want you to see over the sessions is how the mother changed, and because of her change, what happened within this interaction. Okay, fingers crossed. Blink every time it goes black, I think. No. So that you don't feel like. Let's see what it is in there. Let's see what it is. Okay, Baba. No more burger. No burger. There's something here also. Let me do now. Let me do. Move in. Move in. Move in. So this is where the video feedback really works. You know, when she saw herself doing this, she kind of realized, why am I doing this? So video feedback is very powerful because it tells the mother what worked and what didn't work. Okay, and this is what we're really looking for, is we're looking for the child to initiate communication. So we want This is really the core impairment, is that children don't initiate enough. And so this spontaneous initiation is what we're looking for. Okay, again, nice request. Okay, so from very little vocalization, he's actually now vocalizing. He went ba. And small, but real requests that he now makes. I'm going to stop this now because this clock is kind of like 6 minutes. Okay, and now she's putting words back into the into the interaction.
Many bubbles, Vishwa. Vishwa blowing. Blowing? Vishwa blowing bubbles. Blowing.
Okay, so what we did what was called a pilot trial. And so this is called a randomized control trial. So we compared children who received the intervention to those who didn't. We used graduate level counselors who had really no exposure to child development. And first of all, one of the things was to see whether parents would accept this. And this was very high acceptability, very high fidelity, which means the quality of the sessions were very good. And this was really the first definitive RCT from a low resource setting showing non-specialists could deliver a complex intervention for autism. This is really for the more technocrats around here. These two graphs really show is that our children who receive the treatment really are doing much better. So the parents are showing much more synchronous than what are the controls. And the children are just giving many more signals when they receive this intervention. So one of the things that when this trial got over was really that there are other things happening in children's life, and we've just had so many interesting presentations today around the sensory issues and other issues that children with autism struggle with. So one of the next steps was really to develop a package that could support the coexisting problems. And again, I'm not going into too much details around this, but we really took a very systematic process again, keeping in mind that this was again a non-specialist who couldn't do very high-level work, but could work through a simple, what we call a clinical decision algorithm, that you ask a question and based on the answer, you give a certain piece of advice. And one of the key, one of the key modules that we've developed is around parent mental well-being. So that's really a very important component that we've developed. The priority for the coexisting problems really comes from the family, like what do they want handled? Is it a sleep issue? Is it a toileting issue? Is it a behavior issue? So again, it's very individualized. We finished a trial just now a couple of years ago. In rural Maharashtra, we had 40 children that this is called a randomized controlled trial. So we compared families that got the intervention to families that didn't get the intervention. A 70% finish, so finishing of acceptability was a little lower in a rural setting, but therapist fidelity remained high. Again, our graphs are very, very similar. So really, what are our conclusions from this? Our conclusions are that an intervention like this is potentially, you can use frontline workers, you can use a non-specialist. This is a really important thing that we found. It also shows very promising early results. So we cannot go to the government and say this is the intervention to do, but we can say, look, we've got the right signals at the moment. We've got a fully manualized intervention, which we're very excited about. And so really, this is again, the first two steps are things we've already done, and I just want to quickly present what we're doing now. So we're now in Compass. It started last year, and the idea really is that we want to do what's called a definitive trial. So we want to get enough evidence which will tell the government that this will work or not work. And for this, we're doing two really exciting things. We are working with workers that exist. So this is going to be a definitive trial in Delhi. And we are going to work with an ASHA worker, who's the frontline health worker. But more interestingly, we are recruiting from two premier institutes in the country. So we are recruiting from AIMS, and we are recruiting from Maulana Azad. So, you know, we've got what is potentially the best service available in public health, and we're going to see how our intervention matches up to that. Just for some of you who may be interested, what does this frontline worker do? They are a worker in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. They work at a community level, so it's a community level worker who really knows the families around her. Home visiting is already part of her focus, so doing a home intervention is not such a big leap. She's incentivized, so this is something we could add on without adding a burden of work in a way. We could just go to workers who feel they want to do this. And she already uses counseling as an approach. So these are all really important characteristics that she already has. I think the other thing that we're really excited about is we're trying to develop a digital platform. And so the idea really is not just for learning. So many of us now have done learning courses, but we're really trying to put this package onto a digital platform where we can be training in any part of the world and people can be learning in any part of the world. But more importantly, where we can be assessing and supervising in any part of the world. So really making a critical and fundamental good use of specialist time. So the learning system I've just discussed, we also want a very clear competency measure. So how do I know X and Y is good at this intervention and I can allow them to proceed? So kind of a certification process. How do we record data and how can this be collated? And quality assessments, and then also some degree of precision medicine. So can we change interventions in a way that would really suit the family? I think in India we're quite lucky because we do have the RBSK. I don't know how functional it is in Bengal, but the government has already mandated to do things for children with disability. I think it's really up for many of us in the audience here to really start pushing for what are the packages that go into these services. So this is really something that we have to start thinking about more seriously. Before I end, I'm going to show you a little video which ends with two parents, but before that, I just want to thank a number of collaborators. There's a huge number of people who work to conduct trials like this. So just thanks to all the team at Sangat, but also Manchester, Liverpool, and in Harvard now. I'm just going to show you the last few words.
Behavioral therapy, and I would expect compliance for him. I would want him to obey whatever I was telling him to do. But over the sessions, I realized that there was another side of the story. And Josh was wanting to tell me something, and I was not giving him time. So PAS helped me to make that transition from not just telling Josh, but listening to Josh. And that's made such a huge difference in the way I interact with him. It has made him so much calmer because he knows that I will listen to him. So PAS has been like, it's been a huge, huge privilege to work with PAS, and it's something which needs to be appreciated, and actually it's something which all of us, all parents, need to actually practice PAS so that you give respect to the child also as to what the child is wanting to say.
Thankful ह्या पासाक लागून कित्याक ती फ्रेशली येवन मायंड रिफ्रेश करताली, एक सेशना उपरांत एक सेशन दिताली. ते आज सेशन जावन गेली ती जाल्यार हांव अंडरस्टँड जातलें तेजें एक प्रॉब्लेम अशें करून करून 13 सेशन जालें. आजून म्हाका जर परतून जर तेंच्यांनी म्हटलें सेशन आसा तूं घेवपाक रेडी आसा, हांव 100% घेवपाक रेडी आसा.
Okay, thank you. That's my talk.